Hi, everyone. Welcome to Groundbreaking Growth podcast. I'm Emily Lawrence, your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Jen Knox.
Morning, everyone. 3 awesome guests on the line today. We have Scott Butcher, who is our Director of Strategic Growth Advisory. We have Jason Jaworski, who's actually our Chief Operating Officer here at Stanball-Ness. And then Tom Hyde, who is a Principal Technical Consultant in our Power BI group. So a ton of knowledge on all things data, which we're really excited about. And just to jump right into it, when we're thinking about data and strategic growth and how we really drive that, Jason, I'd love if you could share a little bit about kind of SN's story with data over the past 2, 5, 10 years, and really how that's been key in our growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started with the firm back in 2019, and I would say that our maturity level was pretty low when it came to really knowing and understanding our data. And part of my responsibility coming on as chief operating officer was to really evaluate how we look at data and all the different platforms that we have here at SN. And we use platforms like Deltek Vision. We use an HRIS system now today. We were using Smartsheet, Excel, and we really needed to understand, what was important from a KPI standpoint in order to really manage success here at SN. So that was really kind of where we started. And obviously, as we continue our conversation today, you'll kind of learn kind of where we started to where we are today. So that's really part of the overall review of what we had to do to in the past 3 years to get where we are today.
And for firms that are maybe at a point in their development and growth where they're just saying, hey, we really need to start looking at all of these systems and how they talk and connect. What's like one of those first steps you take? Is it just knowing where all your data is at?
Well, I think you got to ask yourself, what's important to me? What's important to us? What do we need to be measuring to consider ourselves successful? Once you know and you understand that, you can know and understand where you need to be looking. So, you'll find out, it's like you think about, okay, without having data at your fingertips, like we do today, where am I constantly going to look for information to know and understand how we're operating today? I think that's really the first important step that you really have to look at in order to really identify where you need to go. Right. So I think that's really the important step there.
Makes sense. And I guess, Scott, from being a kind of a user of our data internally, right? Data, to your point, Jason, means things to maybe different departments or different end users. Scott, how do you leverage the data SN has, I guess?
So it's interesting, Jen. I've been with Stanball-Ness for 2.5 years, and pretty much since the beginning, I've had meetings with Jason. And in some of our early meetings, when reporting up into operations, I was having to go multiple places to find pieces of data, and it wasn't easy on me. And honestly, it was a little frustrating on me. And then, as they've started to really pull together, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the dashboards. Suddenly it was all there in one place, one central location, one central source of truth. And that makes my job, as I'm prepping for these meetings, as well as I'm managing the practice, everything I need to know is at one stop, and it's real time, or as close as real time as you can get.
Yeah.
And so I always know what's going on. And before we get off the call today, we need to talk a little bit about making it cultural. Because, Jason, the one thing I see with all the clients I'm working with is just getting them to even get to that CRM step is pulling teeth, much less having some sort of real central truth of data. And Stanball-Ness is obviously a success story. And how can that success be emulated with some of our clients?
Yeah.
No, that's a very great point. Yeah, we definitely can touch base on that for sure.
So, Jason, can you expand a little bit on the specific steps we've taken to to leverage our data in a more efficient way across the board, across all of SN.
Yeah, well, we've really, we'll talk about the investment a little bit here a little bit later, but you really have to be all in when it comes to making a decision on moving into data automation and really taking that big leap. And I think what you need to understand is we've been able to go from taking 5 to sometimes 30 minutes to dig up data to having your data at your fingertips in a matter of seconds.
Mm.
And when I mean that, I'm talking in all aspects. I'm talking employee data, client data, opportunities, projects, anything and everything you need is at your fingertips in a matter of seconds. In the past, you would have to open up each program and you'd have to look for the report. Then you'd have to run the report. Then you'd have to wait for it to populate, and there are times this could take 30 minutes. At the end of the day, you just got to pain through it. You got to take the necessary steps, understand the investment, which we'll talk about, and everything that's important to you, which we talked about earlier, that you've identified before you decided to make the step, is all at your fingertips. And you're getting things in a matter of seconds, which can be sometimes dangerous. And it's like, I can't believe I have all this information now, all of a sudden. But it's really an exciting thing, and it's important because it allows you to make decisions so much faster, which ultimately turns into monetary value, right? So it's really an exciting thing.
Yeah, and it's about that ROI, because to your point, if you have 20 practice leaders spending 30 minutes to an hour a day pulling data just to make decisions, then it's like, okay, how quick do these hours add up and those billing rates add up of what you could have generated as a firm? So there's definitely an ROI attached to it, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
a great example of how we're using this and just the power of the system we have in place now. We have biweekly business development meetings, and it used to be that 3 separate reports were generated out of our CRM, opportunity reports. They were PDF'd. It was emailed out a couple days in advance of our business development meeting. Everybody attending the meeting had to take some time, go through it, look at all the different reports. And then a lot of our time in the meeting was spent talking about the reports. Now the data is literally at our fingertips in a click.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to spend that time talking about that. We don't need to wait for the report to come out. It's all there. So what's that has changed as far as the business development is it's not a meeting about reporting. It's a meeting about strategy. And it's really freed us to be more strategic in our approach because the data is already there. We don't have to take time to talk about the data.
That's a really good point, Scott. And it's the same thing with when I meet with our practice area leaders. We've really changed the way that we've approached those meetings. It's not about us getting together and looking through your data. It's about us getting together and talking about the results of your data, where it's been, how the results of you reviewing your data and any actionable or opportunities that need to be taken, steps that have to be taken in order to move forward in the right direction. So that's the beauty of where we are today is you can go and look at your data anytime you want. You don't have to wait for something to be refreshed. And our reports refresh 3 to 6 times a day depending on the type of data. So it's pretty real time, and you can go in and get your information whenever you want. So it's really important to, in order for anybody in our firm, no matter your level, to be successful, we want to make sure you have the tools that you need and the data that you need. We're as transparent as we can be with anyone, no matter the level in the firm.
And you think of the real world application of that, because this is literally conversations that Jason and I have. We look at utilization. Okay, utilization is down for this team member. Let's click on this other tab and look at the opportunities and talk about the pipeline and how that's going to impact that person. All right there, all clickable, all real time.
Absolutely, because and when it comes to the KPIs, and you think about what you're measuring, I always tell everyone, we measure things like utilization, realization. We look at, dollar per hour, all those things. And I always say, you can't always focus on one thing because every KPI we have is a part of an entire story. It's one chapter of an entire story. So you really got to understand every little piece, which is why we need to make sure we're transparent on everything that we measure with everyone.
Yeah. And I feel like I want to jump on Tom here and get his input, because right, it's a little bit garbage in, garbage out. Like, how do we know that we can trust kind of the reporting and what we're seeing in these dashboards?
Yeah, so I could speak to that. So, when we started, we did not have a data warehouse built yet. That's something we kind of put in place. What that is sort of a snapshot of your production database, but a lot of time goes into auditing the data, rolling the data up, and making sure it's accurate. And then from that point on, we use the data warehouse for our reporting and our data analytics, and we know that that data is good. And anyone creating new reports can go hit our data warehouse and know someone spent the time up front to make sure that data is accurate.
So when you say data warehouse, I know we use Vision, we use maybe some spreadsheets. Like, what exactly are we using that roll up into that data warehouse specifically, and what is a data warehouse? How does that all work together?
Yeah, so data warehouse is kind of a snapshot or a subset of your live production database. It rolls it up into a more manageable, usable set of data. A lot of the complexity in a production database, you might have hundreds of tables, has been summarized into 30 tables. And now it's much easier to understand. New people to your database, oh, I understand this, whereas the production database might take several years to understand.
Yeah.
So it takes care of a lot of that. I know, in terms of automation, that's something we run every night, populate our data warehouse, so these reports can run on top of it. There's a lot of benefits for that. There's speed, there's security. If you were giving, say, an outside consultant access to your production database, there's some sensitive data in there that maybe you don't want them to see. Whereas our data warehouse, when we take the snapshots, we only collect data, that's okay to be used by the consultants or the people writing the reports. So there's a lot of benefits on data warehousing. I could almost talk in a whole hour on that topic, but I know we're talking about data automation. And that's one of the things we do automate overnight is the population of the data warehouse.
So, and to continue on that, the types of things that we pull from, we run reports and we pull from, obviously we use Vision. We have an HRIS system that we just implemented in the past year. So we're starting to implement that, and we're, tracking things like open and closed positions, and the whole employee journey is kind of tracked through the HRIS system, which in previous years we've used Vision for. We've used Smartsheet. We've, something as simple as Smartsheet. We've used Excel. And that's the beauty behind Power BI and why we went with Power BI. Number one, we're a Microsoft provider, so there's that. But Power BI allows you to pull data from multiple sources and create one report with information that's important to us, right? So that one source of truth, you can pull data from multiple data sets and create the exact thing that you want, which is fantastic. So we started, utilizing Power BI in, 2019, and we started with some basic project management reporting, but now we've got extensive project management reporting. We've got business development, labor reporting, financial reporting, HR reporting, which includes things like compensation, diversity, talent data, and we have manager type reporting. So we've really expanded what we report on, and Power BI has allowed us to do that because of the flexibility to touch multiple data sets. So we're really, we've been really fortunate to have a tool like that to allow us to really expand what we do.
Yeah. And question for you, Tom and Jason, when firms are thinking about their strategy around data, is Power BI and maybe this data warehousing and leveraging data like that, it's not just for the big firms, right? It's not even just for the middle-sized firms. At what level, size-wise, employee count, et cetera, should firms start thinking about how they organize their data and leverage their data and investing in something a real management system like we're talking about.
So you bring up a really good point, and we've been through some. Tom can attest to this. We've been through some of the pains of trying to sell Power BI services, and some of the smaller firms, it's harder for them because of the level of investment that it takes sometimes to build some of these reports. But what I will tell you is this: the investment to implement data automation, it's not cheap from a dollar standpoint,
Yeah.
right? But you have to understand the outcome and the value that it brings to your firm at the end of the day. It heavily outweighs any financial investment if you really think about it. Implementing data automation in like your daily business, it creates efficiencies that will, in my opinion, it's next to priceless. So you have to understand that. And I'm a little biased to that, of course, so I will say that. But for us, having data at our fingertips, it's allowed us to make decisions quickly. It's allowed us to have results that result in monetary value.
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at the investment from all angles at the end of the day. It's not just about what's it going to cost, what can I afford? It's what are we going to get out of it? What's the value? And in my opinion, it pays off 10 times plus at the end of the day. So you got to look at it from monetary dollar, what's it costing me up front, but what's the ultimate value at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So is it a little harder for some of the smaller firms? Yeah, it can be because it's a big investment to chew off in the beginning. But once you get rolling, it's pretty amazing what you find out you can get.
Yeah, I'd add to that, even the smaller clients can see a big benefit from automation because they might have a certain report that somebody spends 10, 20, 30 hours on a month.
Yeah.
To have that automated, you've now freed up that time. And I mean, as far as return on investment, right there, you would eliminate those hours every month.
Well, you talk, Tom, about it's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And the stuff that automation is doing is taking the place of the grunt work that nobody wants to do anyway.
Yeah.
So, so much of, the clients I work with, or so many of them, are seller doer model. So you have project managers or principals that also must go get work. And they always, 100% of the time say, we're too busy. Well, how do we free up some of their time? If they're spending 5, 20, 30 minutes a day trying to find stuff, and we can get that automated, now they can go out and sell, they can bring in work. And so not only are they doing high value stuff and there's a better ROI for their time, they're actually doing stuff that are financially impacting the company in the future.
And I liked what you said too, Jason, when you mentioned it helps with decision making, right? You have all of this data, you have it at your fingertips, you can have those conversations and really make informed decisions.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think,
because the thing is it, a decision, you could be making a decision on so many different things. I mean, whether it's staffing, whether it's do we move forward with a project or not, workload, I mean, you name it. And having that data right there versus having to wait for someone to populate a report and being able to make a decision, I mean, it can ultimately cost you money versus making money depending on how you look at it. So you really got to look at the value at the end of the day of what you're getting and the efficiencies you're gaining. I always had this mantra and internally, it's like, my goal is to make everybody's job easier when it comes to our internal reporting. I want things efficient and I want them simplistic. I want things very simple for people to use. And even things that we've created, I've reinvented 3 or 4 times because it's not necessarily easy enough for people to use. And I, of course, I always welcome questions, but I want to make it easy as if someone that's never seen the report can go in and use it without asking questions. That's the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I love that. That's that continuous improvement mindset, right? You need to invest in those processes and structure so that the actual revenue generating side can do what it does well. And I think of when we talk about not investing in technology, right? That whole Southwest Airlines thing, right? That lack of investment in their systems and how they run the organization. So I think sometimes thinking about that mindset, that continuous improvement mindset, and communicating that to leadership, that can be really difficult to communicate that, to talk about the risks associated with not investing. And so how do you really get senior leaders on board, the whole organization on board? How do you change the mindset for some data implementation you're trying to do?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience with this. So in my earlier days, I was in and out of AE firms every single day doing project management training. That's what I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
So, I was, and the great thing about that situation is I was also a project manager for like 15 years in engineering firm. So I had been in their shoes, right? So it was easy for me to walk in there and get them to understand the why, right? And when I say the why, that's a big thing in this whole thing. Number one, everybody needs to understand why we're doing what we're doing. You need to get buy-in from your leaders from the top down. If you don't have buy-in from your leaders, it's really, really hard to implement what you're trying to do. It's very, very important if you're trying to change a mindset in the
Mhm.
firm
Mhm.
from a cultural standpoint. Um, it's important that those leaders, once they're bought in, they control the desired expectations. They need to understand how they need to communicate that. So coaching them and how to do that, very important. Somewhere where a Scott or yourself would be perfect for going in and help coaching. And how do I convey the right message to my firm in order to change a mindset? And we have to be willing to adapt in order to stay forward thinking. That's the way I look at it. In order to be leading edge in our industry, that's how I approach SN. It's like we have to continue to be forward thinking and just people understanding the why is so important. So that's really, how we face the challenge, as far as help changing mindsets within the firm. It's just that buy-in is so important. So Scott, I don't know. I mean, you've dealt with this also. I don't know if from a buy-in standpoint, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I mean, you're talking change management
Yeah.
because it's a big change for a lot of companies, and as I alluded to earlier, even some basic stuff that we would think is basic. Yeah, you need a robust CRM. Companies that we're working with of all sizes are just really struggling to do it, and one of the main reasons why they're struggling to do it is because their leadership is not doing it themselves. And if it's
Right.
not being done at the top, why do I have to do it?
Mhm.
That's exactly right. And one of the biggest things even here at SN, it's like when we try to implement change, we're all on board. If I don't see a leader implementing that change and them, saying what doing what we're preaching, it's like you best believe, like I'm on top of that because it's so important that we have to practice what we preach,
Yeah.
right? If you want buy-in and you truly believe we need to be moving in that direction, we got to also play the part too. We can't be exempt of it just because, you're at a certain level. Everybody's on the same ball field and we all have to play ball the same way. So that's really important. And that's probably the most effective way to get people on board is, having buy-in from the top and everybody practicing what they're preaching at the end of the day. And then I look at it even further than that. It's like, let's have open communication and allow for feedback then from our staff and the people that we're trying to implement these change, and then make sure that the proper training is in place and that we're following up because it's really easy for people to slip back into their old ways.
Mhm.
I've seen it firsthand. But the one thing that I've learned internally at SN, and I'm happily say this is like, what we've done is like the last thing we want is somebody going into our Deltek Vision system and start running reports again. So what I've done, of course, is I'm starting to remove access because I don't want people to fall back in their old ways. And when they try to do that, then they tend to reach back out to me, and I realize either I'm failing because I'm not offering the right training to keep them up to speed, or we just need to have another conversation because I just need to help them along the way. So it's a journey. It's not about conveying a message and saying, well, they've got it. Like you have to continue to follow up and making sure that people understand that, look, we're serious about this mind change. It's important to our growth. And we have to continue to do this to move forward. So there's a lot of steps in there, but you have to follow through at the end of the day. Training is only as good as the follow through.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think to your point, Jason, it's like you need to be listening for that feedback, right? Because as you take pain points off the employees, then they're like, oh, yeah, like it's so easy to go into Power BI and pull this thing. Of course, I'm going to go there, not Vision or whatnot. So I think it's listening and hearing how they're utilizing the system, what reports they would want, what kind of data and metrics they're trying to get a hold of, so they can kind of co-create that with the leadership so that you can really leverage it for business success.
Yeah.
Jason
So
and Tom, what have you found with the training is the most effective approach? Is it the one-on-one coaching? Is it written instruction? Is it micro-learning videos?
You mean on the Power BI side,
Mhm.
the training? So probably the most effective way is sort of an agile methodology, which is get something in front of the client as fast as you can and get feedback. And then that starts that interaction and then the back and forth. And yes, we might go through several iterations till we get exactly what they want, but that's the quickest way to get them exactly what they want, and that's how you learn as well.
I wonder if Jason and Tom, maybe you can provide an example of a way in which, you know, someone from a certain part of SN or a client has come to you and said, we need this, like, we're not able to find this. We need easier access to this, or we need some way to get this information.
I have a whole list.
Yeah.
You
I'm sure you
wouldn't-
have many
wouldn't-
examples.
You wouldn't believe. Actually, you know, it's been very encouraging that everyone has really adapted to the Power BI reporting, because I can't tell you how many ideas come my way, come Tom's way of, hey, we would like to see this. It's to the point where we can't even keep up. You know, it's sad to say, but it's exciting that people are willing, and we've welcomed this, of course, because this is what we want. We want people to come forward with their ideas, because you know, myself and even the other leaders in the firm, you know, it takes a village at the end of the day to really get everyone the tools that they need. And, you know, I always encourage people submit their ideas. Doesn't mean we implement everything, but, you know, we always evaluate ideas. And, you know, we've had a ton of different business development type ideas come in, and we've tied things to marketing campaigns. That was an idea that came through, and you're able to tie a marketing campaign out of the project, so you can actually see what projects came out of what marketing campaigns, things like that. So you wouldn't believe the list that I have if I actually showed you. It's amazing the amount of ideas that come in multiple times a week from people of, hey, I got this idea, or it's not even a new idea of a new report. It's, hey, on this existing report, it would be great to see this. So it's very exciting just to see the involvement from everyone.
So with the marketing campaign example, so marketing came to you and said, hey, Jason, Tom, we're looking for a way to track our campaigns and track the projects and how these campaigns are actually generating work for us, and be able to generate some tie some numbers to it.
Yeah, so at one point, whether it was marketing or somebody else said, hey, we should be looking at our marketing campaigns. And at another point, I believe our director of business development said, hey, it'd be really great to know what projects are coming out of these campaigns. So we were able to fairly easily tie that to where you could just click on the number of projects tied to a campaign, and it would actually open up the list of projects. And then that way we can actually see the amount of money we're getting back, and we're, you know, the revenue that we're gaining from the actual marketing campaigns that we've been launching. So it kind of shows the success story there of different campaign launches.
And that's, to me, that's a marketer's dream,
It's
because the
huge.
problem with marketing across all industries, but especially in the built environment, is the sophistication is not there to be able to do that. And I think it was there was a retailer 100 years ago, John Wanamaker. He had stores in Philadelphia and suburbs, and he had a famous quote that's still heard a lot today. And it's like, I know advertising works, I just don't know which 50% of it actually works.
Yeah.
And that's, marketers struggle with that. So as soon as you can start to tie opportunities and eventually wins and revenue to marketing campaigns, that justifies what marketing's doing.
Yeah.
Or it allows them to tailor their strategy, right? If they know this 50% is working really well, maybe it's the webinars, maybe it's the, you know, outreach specifically to clients, et cetera. So they can, you know, tailor that strategy to what's
Scale it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we have Power BI reporting that not only tracks those campaigns, but we have all those webinars in there. We know exactly who the attendees were, where they came from, all that in Power BI reporting. So, you know, the opportunities with Power BI reporting, what you can do is pretty endless. It's just what's important to you at the end of the day. You know, in order to be successful, and you can, of course, you can have data all over the place, but at the end of the day, you want to have what's important, because it's easy to get lost in data also.
Oh my gosh. As someone who does not dabble a whole lot with numbers and is more on the marketing side, I will say that is so true. That hits home. It's very easy to get lost.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
yeah, so that's what I would say as far as, you know, implementing with leaders and all of that. It's really important to get buy-in, because it's a big investment.
And to piggyback on Emily, your comment, right? So numbers can be intimidating and overwhelming, but what I love about these dashboards that have been created as the user, it's not just numbers and text, it's tables, it's graphics. It's really at a glance. I can look at something in a second, know what the data is telling me.
Yeah.
You can make it look pretty. Those architects, they love pretty graphs and things like that. So, you know,
Yes.
when you're in the CPA world and all of that, it's all about the numbers. When you're in the architectural world, they want to see graphs and Gantt charts and all that good stuff. So, I'm capable of doing all of that and pleasing everyone.
Well, that's great. So we'll kind of wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been just wildly insightful. I know our listeners will absolutely be able to take away some key points from you on how to leverage data automation and have that help with their strategic growth. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this conversation.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having us.
everyone.